I'm Pam Bailey, co-founder of More Than Our Crimes, and we advocate for second chances. And we're here today to discuss the benefits of allowing people who are still incarcerated in prison to vote. That's why I'm very proud of DC and of you, Councilmember White, for championing this cause to join Maine and Vermont in allowing people to vote while they're still in prison. And I think that's why we also now have Massachusetts, California, and Illinois who are considering doing the same.
My entire incarceration, all I ever wanted to do was be free, be, back into society, be able to participate in my community and my civic duties. And one of the things that we knew as incarcerated women and men that we couldn't do was vote. Like, that was one of the things that was highlighted. You don't have rights at all, but they always talk about the right to vote. So when I heard that we was given an opportunity, I wanted to vote immediately. I wanted to be a part of the community. And I knew that the whole notion that, your vote don't count because no matter what happens, they're going to do what they're doing anyway. I realized that wasn't accurate. Like, the votes actually do count. So if the only way that you can sit and complain about something is if you have action. You've taken action first, right? And then if it don't work, then you can complain. But don't complain if you didn't even do nothing about it. So that's what I felt like. I wanted to make sure that my 2 cents or 1 cent or whatever my vote was worth was actually put in that bucket.
I always wanted to because I understood that was a hallmark of my citizenship. And when you talk about rehabilitation and even with me having a life sentence, I always knew that I would come home. So if I was going to be a citizen and come out of criminal mentality into a citizen and me had a mindset of citizenship, that was part of it. And you got to remember, when you disenfranchised, because that's, when you get incarcerated, it already alienates you from society. Right. So to have that ability to now partake in a very political system in your country, or especially local politics, I jumped at it,
I was raised to believe that civic engagement is a responsibility and a vital part of creating the world that we want to live in together. And so when my vote was taken based on my felony conviction as a teenager, that part of me was stripped away. Many people who've experienced a carceral setting, I saw a lot of things in there that I would like to change. A lot of dehumanization, a lot of systemic things that don't make any sense and don't make us safer as a society. And so voting is a way for me to be a part of the change that I want to see. And I think that we are going to continue to have mass incarceration and mass supervision, and this is a society of continuous control until people who've been directly impacted by this system are enfranchised and able to raise their voices and ask for change.
It sounds a little cliche, but I would say I didn't choose the issue. It chose me. It's deciding to introduce the bill started a bit before. When I was going through law school and working on Capitol Hill for Congresswoman Norton, my brother was incarcerated in Petersburg. He had kids, so it impacted our entire family. And I did the drive from DC to Petersburg frequently to make sure he could stay in contact with his kids. But I didn't like what I saw in terms of conditions of confinement. But I got really angry when my brother came back to the halfway house, which at that time was Hope Village, and the barriers they put up to make it harder for people to reintegrate back into society. So I made a determination that any time in my career I was in a place to advance these issues, I would. So when I got elected, we passed the bill to give free IDs and birth certificates to people returning from incarceration, free transportation stipend. I created housing subsidies for formerly incarcerated residents. And so they came to me and said, okay, we really appreciate everything you've done. These ideas came from the returning citizen community. They said, now the important thing we really want is for people who are still incarcerated to be able to vote. And I'll be honest with you, I took a deep breath and I said, whoo, that's a high hurdle, because I wasn't aware of anywhere in the country that had done it, and no one had. Vermont and Maine never took that right away. But I'm a lawyer, and so I know that there's nothing in the Constitution barring incarcerated people from voting. So I said, let me go into the history to understand when, why, and how the right to vote was taken away. And as soon as I started researching when each state, 48 states and the District of Columbia, took away the right to vote, it was almost all surrounding passage of the 14th Amendment ending slavery and the constitutional amendment granting Black men the right to vote. So it was absolutely directly a racist history that we needed to unwind, which is why I called the bill Restore the Vote, because I wanted to remind people that it was a right that was taken away. As I really looked at the Constitution, I said to myself, you know, most rights you still carry with you into prison. Constitutional rights, the right to marry, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. But the most fundamental right is, Conrad said, a hallmark of democracy, the right to vote, gets taken away as sort of a privilege. The right to vote is not a privilege, it's foundational, it's a hallmark of democracy. But the credit for passing the bill, for getting it to the council, and for passing it goes to formerly incarcerated residents and members of the Commission on Reentry. They're the ones who said, this is what we need to do. And frankly, they are, and other returning citizens are the ones who laid the groundwork through their actions post incarceration, sending signals across the district. We are members of society, productive members, in helping move things forward. Well, generally, elected officials listen to the people voting. So if there are poor conditions in incarceration, not preparing people for coming home, not giving them the support once they get home, those conditions don't change unless the people affected can vote. And so if they are voting in their interest, as most people in a democracy do, their interest is to improve the conditions of incarceration, which is going to make us safer in the long run.
When I was young, like I always had a sense of citizenship and even patriot. I was a patriot. My family, all of them fought in wars. My grandfather, he fought in wars. So this sense of service was always in me. However, during the time frame I was brought up, and I was brought up in the 90s and in the 80s, it was a crack cocaine, and all this was in full effect, so to say. So for me, it kind of got lost because in this era, I felt alienated to be a 15-year-old man walking down the street, just coming, taking my evening nap from school and going to the store and have the police blitz me and ask me where I'm going and, blitz me, throw me on the car, boom. 15, this try to wrap your mind. I was a child. These things and the stories and the headlines that was coming at me at the time, it started to really alienate me, made me feel like, oh, I must be different. The citizen, our voice can be heard even through the one vote that I do count.
So if we can somehow, some way contribute to changing our conditions on the inside by voting, because these same people that's legislating all these other laws can also legislate laws to change the conditions on the inside, right? Then that's our way to contribute not only to society, but also to ourselves. And once you're incarcerated, we have our own little world. That's our own society. That's our own community. And we feel useless and helpless sometimes, or hopeless sometimes, because we can't do anything about it. But if you give us that opportunity to do something about it, we probably would be a lot better in prison and feel more competent, feel more empowered and franchised, right? And to vote for not only ourselves, but other situations and topics that goes on within DC and, across the country.
One of the things I want to emphasize about these spaces, these physical spaces, and the culture there, it is the most extreme example of government interference in someone's life. It's completely artificial. These are not authentic environments. These are made up institutional spaces where every aspect of the space, including what kind of soup you can get from the commissary, is driven by the government. And not having a voice in that government is incredibly dehumanizing, right? It's otherizing. A lot of us formerly incarcerated folks have touched on this today, but it tells us that we're not equal and never will be equal.
I think this is really important for anybody who's incarcerated, who's feeling like it doesn't matter if I vote or who I vote for. Um, the ideas that I was able to pass into law, free transportation, free ID, right to vote, right? These ideas existed before I got into office, but they needed someone elected to carry them forward. So if you vote, vote for the person you believe that will carry your interests forward. Someone without the same lived experiences as me may not have prioritized these issues. So that vote mattered because I could have lost the election and these issues probably would not have moved forward. When you go to an elected official anywhere and say, hey, can you make a video for people who are incarcerated, so they know about your platform? Okay. But if you go to that same person and say, hey, there are 10,000 people registered to vote in this prison, and they'd like to hear from you on the issues. You know what? You're probably going to get some action. They're going to do that video. And so I think it really comes back to the power that incarcerated people who have the right to vote hold, but the power only works if you exercise it.
Bruh, they out here fighting for us, bruh. I have these conversations, by the way, already. They out here fighting for us, bruh. And believe it or not, a lot of them look like us. Because a lot of people, and I'm talking to you, a lot of us incarcerated, especially guys like us who've been there over 2 decades, we think, when we hear politician, we think white people who don't care about black people. Just like we think that they think when they see black people or young black people, those are criminals who don't care about the life in society. So it's a disconnect. I would bet that there are some incarcerated people from DC today who don't know that Councilmember Robert White is African American.
Hmm.
They don't know that Trayon White, they might know he African American, but don't know that he look like us. Like he got the dreads, he wear the so he's relatable. They out here fighting for us. They look like us. Look at Ira. If Ira don't change the way you think a little bit enough to say, well, maybe they do care, then I don't really know what could. But also educate yourself, because I think one of the biggest things in there that we miss is we're not educated on DC politics. We don't know, how, the protocol. We don't know how things go to council, and then they have to go to the committee, and then they have to have a hearing. And they don't know. They don't know they can actually go to the hearing.
So as we moving away from a society of mass incarceration back to re-entry, right? It's in your best interest to have council members like Mr. White who are proactive and understanding that you're gonna need housing, you're gonna need transportation, you're gonna need a fresh start. And if you serious about your life, and if you serious about this process of you becoming a better individual, it's in your best interest to vote. And this is your opportunity to get your rights back through voting. Anything that you've been disenfranchised because you're a felon, this is your opportunity, bro. This is your opportunity to get back some of that power that was lost. So if you really serious about your life and want to have a smooth transition back in society where you can get a job, maybe a career, and have the ability not to rely on nobody else but yourself, then Councilmember White and all the rest of those who think forward, as far as these men coming out after XYZ. Now they think about your best interest. Now it's time for you to think about your best.
You're part of this too, and you have power to create change. The other thing I'll point out to the people behind the walls is if your vote didn't matter, why are all of these people working so hard on the other side to make sure you don't have it?
You get it.
Your vote counts, and you don't want it to get down to small, minuscule numbers, right? The more people that vote, the more we have a chance to make change, and we need that change. That change is critical.
We're dealing with a public safety crisis, and I'm on the council, and there are a number of proposals that are, based in fear, and people are feeling fear, and elected officials are trying to be responsive to that. I'm nervous that we're going to go back down a road that we've done in the 80s and 90s and make the same mistakes because we're operating from fear. But if all I'm doing as an elected official saying, no, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, I'm not moving the ball because those things are going to pass because a bad plan beats no plan every day.
Wonderful.